Welcome to this clearly sustainable interview, which is the second in the series Ancient Stories, Modern Meanings. We are talking with Mary O'Donnell, a retired archaeologist with a specialist interest in early Irish culture. She tells us about the feast day of Brigid on the 1st of February, which is the second cross-quarter day in the early Irish calendar. Mary explains the symbolism associated with Brigid and explores the relevance for us today. Mary, welcome again. We're at the second cross quarter of the old Irish calendar, an Imbolc or Brigid's Day. Mm-hmm. So can you introduce us? We spoke before about Samhain and the beginning of the Celtic year. This is the second one. Mm-hmm. Can you introduce this whole idea, who Brigid was and what our meanings are?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, as you said, this is the second of the cross quarters, and was originally called Imbolc or Olmeg. And it was associated with, particularly with the start of the milking season, usually associated perhaps with the lambing first, but getting into that, period where winter transitions into spring. Okay. And then became associated with, particularly with St. Brigid here in Ireland. Brigid, her feast day was started on the eve of the 31st of January, the eve of the 1st of February. So her feast day is the 1st of February, but in early Ireland the tradition started, as we said, like Samhain, started with the dark and went into the light. So for
the evening before.
The evening before, yeah, kind of Ia Féile Vride and then the Lá Féile Vride. So you'd have the sort of the from basically 24 hours from dark to dark would be the kind of considered the period of the festival.
Yeah.
And so Brigid was, I suppose, would originally have been known as a goddess, or in pagan times before Christianity, and in Ireland is particularly associated with Kildare. I mean, she's known by slightly different names in both England and in continental Europe, but associated, as I said, with Kildare. And there are, it's thought that there was perhaps a temple there run by a group of women, of which dedicated to the goddess Brigid, and it was particularly associated with fire.
Okay.
So,
and she was a very important goddess in the Celtic and Irish mythology.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, the stories that come down to us through that, they're written down centuries later, but they give us, and they're told about Saint Brigid, but give us a flavour more of the goddess aspect of Brigid rather than the saint aspect. Okay. So Saint Brigid is basically from, her dates are the early 6th century. So the supposition is that in this, as Christianity took hold in Ireland, the person who was probably the chief priestess of this temple dedicated to Brigid became the saint that we would know today. Right. Because perhaps the chief priestess was known as Brigid in honor of the goddess that she served. But one of the stories, they're basically the stories that are told about her indicate this association with fire.
Yeah, and we have the Brigid flame here.
That's right.
Okay.
And so what they tell the story was that basically in the in Kildare, in the abbey that was there was a perpetual flame burning, like a fire that was tended by the nuns, a bit like the story of the Vestal Virgins in Rome. They tended the fire, and I think there was 19 were tending it, and then on the 20th night Brigid herself would tend the flame, and so this continued even after her death. And on the 20th night they'd bank the fire and walk away and leave it to Brigid to take care of it.
Okay.
And the story is told that this flame, basically no men were allowed into the area where the flame was held, so it was particularly about women, and it stayed there, it stayed alighting until after the Reformation.
Wow.
Yeah, exactly. So that's quite a tradition. So keeping alight from pagan times through Christian times. The cult of the Saint of Brigid took on many of the aspects that are associated with the goddess. And one of the stories that was told is that as Brigid, as a child, basically, before she was born, her mother's pregnant, coming home, goes into labour. She's carrying a pail of milk, which gives us our association with the milking time of Brigid's day.
Yes.
And she comes in, and as she's about to step into the house, she gives birth 1 foot inside the house and 1 foot outside, and she gives birth on the threshold.
And that's important for her symbolism.
Absolutely, yeah. What it talks about is that basically she is the goddess or the patron saint of the threshold. You know, that which carries us from one place to the next, the midwifing.
Okay.
And the other story that's told is that, as you know, in her goddess aspect, that she's a daughter. She's a member of the Tuatha Dé Danann, which, you know, later we would know from the fairy stories or in Ireland, and she's a daughter of the Dagda, or the main, you know, the great god, and she has two sisters also called Brigid, and as Brigid is,
that must have been confusing.
Well, in Ireland we loved the triple aspect, and it was something apparently, you know, they talked about in Christianity, that they had no problem with the idea of the Trinity, because we'd been doing it for centuries,
okay.
or millennia, indeed.
Yeah.
But the idea, it talks about her being the goddess of healing, smithcraft, and poetry. So these sort of aspects come down into they're also associated with the saint.
Okay.
And these are very interesting because they're kind of alchemical crafts or craft,
transformation.
Absolutely, about transformation. But the idea of taking something from one realm and having to take it through the birth process fraught with danger and bring it to birth in another realm.
Yes.
So in a simple, you know, taking the idea of taking poetry from the ether, the idea of taking an idea and trying to birth it, you know, taking Brigid as your guardian so that you can put it onto a page or speak it aloud.
Yes.
You know, for women, the idea of fertility, you want to get pregnant, Brigid was a good woman to be there with you.
Yeah.
Then, you know, as the child is in the womb, how is the birth process going to happen? How are you going to know that you're going to make...
From one realm to another again.
From one realm to another, safe in here, safe out here, what's going to happen in the in-between.
Yes.
And Brigid as the midwife, standing in the threshold, helping to take it from one realm to another.
Okay.
And this is what she knows.
And smithing.
In the same way, I mean, the whole smithing really, particularly iron smelting, had a very particular, always a sacred aspect to it, very well known. And the idea even, you know, that there would have been, that a smith could marry you, because they had, they had sort of those sort of idea of the association with sacred properties, or having, it's a particular craft. And Brigid, again, taking something that's...
taking a stone, putting it in fire, and turning it into steel,
something
iron.
Amazing, something amazing, something different.
Wow.
Absolutely. You know, if you look at something that's made out of like a sword, and you look at that, and you look at the piece of stone, and you think, wow, how did that happen?
Yeah.
Or also you look at something that's completely failed, and you know that you didn't manage to make the transformation. So it wasn't a guarantee.
Oh, absolutely.
When you started off, what would happen at the end? So Brigid, again, standing in that in that threshold, in that sort of taking you through to help you transform from one realm to another, and to do that safely. So at this time of the year too, the folk traditions are very interesting, because we, you know, it's associated with, as we'll know, also the Brigid's cross, made from reeds or rushes, and used to determine boundaries, I guess, in a way, a little bit.
Hung on boundaries, is that right?
Yeah, often hung over the door.
Yes.
On the door, or even in the roof of a barn or something like that. Again, bringing the healing power of Brigid into the house, but the protective nature that she provided. You know, we talked a little bit about, you know, as you move from one season to another, again, a lot of power in the change. Okay, we think, okay, we can be delivered safely from winter into spring, but it's a hope. It's not. It's the beginning of the change. Here in Ireland, we can already feel that beginning to happen.
Yes.
And it's like, so will Brigid help midwife us now from this wintertime perilous, but still not quite there, The food that's appearing now traditionally would have been bón bia, the white food, cheeses, milks, something like that, that will fill a particular gap in the food calendar. Cycle,
okay.
exactly, yeah.
Okay. And going back to the cross here, we have a four-legged cross, a four-armed cross. Some of them are three.
Yes,
were there several different, and these are in different localities.
Different localities made in different ways. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. That's right.
This one is sort of they represented the wheel.
Well, this one is I mean, in a way.
Quarters. Is that what this was? Do you think?
Or I mean, it's a cross. It's associated with Christianity in a very in a more recent sort of form. But also, I think earlier when we see a lot of these sort of almost swastika shapes that are represented on earlier stone carvings and things like that. So it's perhaps a fire wheel originally, or something like representations of those pieces. And again, even the triangular one, perhaps the triple nature of Brigid, those those kind of pieces. But again, look, different localities have different traditions as to what would have happened with that, how they would have been done.
And so those ancient stories of the protector, the patron, the goddess of transformation and transition.
And fertility, I was going to say fertility, she's associated with fire and also with water. In many of there are rivers in Ireland called the Bride River.
Yes, of course, yes.
Yet there are many holy wells, the place where water issues forth from the ground. A place of huge potency, shall we say.
Yes.
You're coming from, again, one realm into the other, water coming from... Life-giving water, and from underground. Where does it come from? What's happening with it? These sort of realms into, we can see in the darkness, and this is coming out.
Yes. And
Brigid associated with many of these wells.
Okay, that's very strong symbolism for one goddess to be holding.
Yeah, she definitely, she's one of the
busy,
very busy. Well, she was held in huge reverence. I mean, called in areas Mary of the Gael, Mary of the Irish, almost on a par with Our Lady.
Okay.
One of the three major saints, St. Patrick, St. Brigid, St. Columcille.
Yeah.
And hugely important, almost a super saint.
Yes. Yes, okay.
Which is very interesting, just as in terms of her as a woman. You have your male saints, but you think you're going back in the past and you're looking at this in Christianity, where men are the ones that have the power and say mass and all of that. But Brigid, being on a par with a bishop.
Wow.
She's seen as having the same rank, and being hugely powerful. The very story of the Brothbreed, of the Brigid's cloak, where she's looking for. The story goes that she's looking for land for her monastery, and the local chieftain says, "Sure, I'll give you a little bit of land, little woman," or whatever. And she's sort of saying, "That's great." So she goes outside and throws. It's much land now as your cloak will cover.
Is what he says to her.
It's what he says to her.
Okay.
So she goes outside, throws the cloak, and then it starts to spread.
Oh, right.
We love a good miracle,
yeah.
And it eventually covers the whole area of the Curragh of Kildare.
Okay, it's a big cloak.
Big cloak. He finally manages to beg her to stop, and she does. But she has enough land. So Brigid's pastures in Kildare.
Right. Okay. So as that goddess of transformation and transition, in a way, she's got relevance today as we transition towards sustainability. That whole sort of fertile boundaries and idea.
I think in that way, in any case of anything, you think, okay, we're here we are doing this piece, and how are we going to we want to get over here, and we're in, certainly we can say, in regards to, as you're talking about, in transition at the moment, in a global sense. Brigid would be a good woman to be standing with you, helping to midwife you from one area to another.
Right. We should maybe see if she's up for taking on another patronage of sustainability or something.
There was also, as you say, her associations with fertility, with land, with food, with those kind of very basic, necessary things that we need, and are very pertinent to where we are.
Yes.
How are we going to feed ourselves?
Yes.
How do we do that safely? And in a way, it speaks to the care we need to do that.
Yeah, these ancient stories, they've got a meaning for modern times. They've got if we lean back into them and so what was the symbolism and that sort of long gestation of these stories, it's time perhaps to give them more credence, though, rather than just thinking, oh, they're just fairy folklore, ha ha ha, and no relevant to today.
Yeah, I mean, I think like anything else, how we use stories or what they say, any myth, any part, it's like, where does it come from? What were people saying? What was important? And from the past, what they're talking about, the cycle of the year, the difficulty inherent in trying to create new things and give them birth in difficult climate. How can that be done safely?
Right.
And what can happen where you start off with one medium and you may end up with something slightly different at the end through the process of that alchemical process or whatever's going to happen to take you through, when in the transformational process, who knows what will happen?
Yes.
We don't know the end product. And that, and the Brigid stories remind us of that. We really don't know what will happen.
So not to be driven by a defined outcome as we start the process of change.
Yeah, having an idea or having ideas, but knowing that to stand into that, there is a gestation period where things have to, in a sense, go in the dark, into the womb, into those places where we don't quite know what's happening, and allow that gestation process. And then in the transition, in the birth process, in that place of transformation, what will happen?
Okay.
We don't know.
Yeah.
We truly don't know, and it's having to take it through and then give birth, and what will that be like afterwards? Again, we don't know.
We don't know.
It reminds us of that.
We'll trust in Brigid.
Indeed.
Okay, and thank you. So the next quarter will be Bealtaine, cross quarter in May, and we'll maybe touch base with that. But thank you for shedding more light on this as we run through the calendar of the old Irish calendar and the reference of the ancient stories to the modern meanings that we can take from those. Thanks very much.
Okay, Victor.
Thank you for joining us for this interview, and we hope you can join us again when we explore Bealtaine, the festival in the beginning of May. You can find podcasts and other interviews on our website clearlysustainable.com.